No one could save the billionaire's son from the fire until a poor boy did the impossible. The glass wall exploded with a sound like a gunshot, and for a split second, everyone screamed at once. Flames roared just inches behind the terrified child, the heat warping the air, the smoke choking every breath. While the boy inside slammed his tiny palms against the glass, crying for a father who was frozen in shock outside. Security guards hesitated. Fire alarms wailed uselessly. And then, out of nowhere, a skinny boy in torn clothes charged forward, his fist already mid-swing as the fire surged higher, daring the world to stop him. People shouted for him to get back. Someone grabbed at his shoulder and missed. The billionaire himself stood paralyzed, hands on his head, mouth open, watching another child risk his life for what his money, his guards, and his power could not buy. The poor boy's knuckles shattered the glass, blood flying, pain screaming through his arm, but he didn't stop. He smashed again and again as the flames licked closer to the trapped child's back. Seconds away from turning rescue into a funeral, the fire had started in the west wing of the estate, a wing no one ever entered unless invited. A wing built of imported glass and polished steel meant to impress investors and humiliate rivals. Inside it, the billionaire's 6-year-old son had been playing alone, forgotten during a charity gala that filled the garden with laughter, wine, and applause. When the smoke first rose, people assumed it was part of the show. When the flames became real, panic spread faster than the fire itself. The guards were trained for intruders, not infernos. The fire suppression system failed. Doors locked automatically. And the glass walls designed to be unbreakable became a transparent prison. Inside, the child screamed, his face streaked with tears, his small body shaking as heat wrapped around him like a living thing. Outside, guests backed away in horror, phones raised, recording instead of helping, frozen between fear and disbelief. The poor boy should not have been there at all. He was the son of a temporary cleaner, brought along because his mother had nowhere else to leave him. He had spent the evening invisible, sitting near the service corridor, watching rich people who never looked down. But when he heard the screaming, something inside him snapped. He didn't think about the fire. He didn't think about the glass. He only saw another child about to die. He ran before anyone could stop him. His sneakers slipped on the stone tiles. Heat burned his face. When he reached the wall, he slammed his fist into the glass and felt pain explode through his bones. The crowd gasped. The glass cracked like a spiderweb, but it didn't give. He screamed, not in fear, but in rage, and hit it again, harder. Ignoring the blood now dripping onto the floor, the billionaire finally moved, shouting orders, promising money, screaming threats, begging anyone to do something. Firefighters were minutes away. Minutes the child inside did not have. The flames surged, setting the curtains alight, the fire reflecting in the glass like a living monster. Inside, the boy collapsed to his knees, coughing, his cries growing weaker. The poor boy struck the glass again, and this time it shattered inward. Shards rained down. Heat blasted through the opening. Without hesitation, he climbed through, cutting his arms and legs, disappearing into the smoke as the crowd screamed his name, even though none of them knew it. For a terrifying moment, there was nothing but fire and black smoke. Then he emerged, dragging the billionaire's son behind him, both of them coughing, both of them burned and bleeding, but alive. He pushed the child out first, and the billionaire dropped to his knees, grabbing his son, sobbing uncontrollably as if his wealth had been reduced to nothing in a single breath. The poor boy collapsed seconds later, his body giving in to the pain he had ignored. As people rushed toward him, the fire finally burst through the roof behind them, confirming what everyone already knew. If he had hesitated even 1 second longer, The rescue would have been impossible. As sirens wailed in the distance and paramedics fought to stabilize both boys. The billionaire stared at the child who had saved his son's life. For the first time that night, he wasn't looking at a reflection of himself in polished glass. He was looking at someone the world had taught him to overlook. And in that moment, surrounded by ashes and broken walls, a truth began to form that would shatter far more than glass in the days to come. The ambulance doors slammed shut, sealing the two boys inside with flashing lights and urgent voices. Outside, the billionaire's estate buzzed with chaos, firefighters battling the blaze, guests whispering theories, phones still recording, still uploading. But inside the billionaire's chest, a different fire had begun to burn. His son was alive, wrapped in an oxygen mask, clutching his hand with fingers that trembled. Across from them lay the other boy, unconscious, bandages already soaking through with red. His small body unnervingly still. At the hospital, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Doctors swarmed the billionaire's son instantly, ushering him into a private room. Specialists called in within minutes. Meanwhile, the poor boy was placed on a gurney in the hallway at first, his mother arriving breathless, eyes wide with terror as she saw the blood, the burns, the glass cuts stitched hastily together. She kept thanking everyone, apologizing for being in the way, apologizing for her son bleeding on the hospital floor. The billionaire noticed. He noticed how the staff's voices softened for him and sharpened for her. How questions were answered quickly when he asked, but brushed aside when she did. Guilt twisted inside him, but it tangled with something darker: fear. Fear of headlines. Fear of lawsuits. Fear that the story would no longer be about a miraculous rescue, but about negligence, locked doors, failed systems, and a child who never should have been alone. By morning, the news had already exploded. Billionaire's son saved in dramatic fire, the headlines read. The footage of shattered glass played on loop. The poor boy's face was blurred, his name omitted, referred to only as a bystander. Public relations teams flooded the hospital, speaking in hushed tones, shaping the narrative before it could harden into something dangerous. When the poor boy finally woke, pain ripped through him like lightning. His arm was in a cast. His chest burned with every breath. His mother wept quietly beside him, holding his uninjured hand, whispering prayers of gratitude and fear. He asked about the other boy first. "Is he okay?" His voice cracked. The question stunned the nurse. She nodded, distracted, and moved on without another word. Later that day, the billionaire came to see him. Not alone. He was flanked by lawyers and aides, their smiles rehearsed, their eyes sharp. He praised the boy's bravery, called him a hero, promised to take care of everything. His words sounded generous, but they landed strangely hollow. When the boy's mother asked what that meant, the room cooled. A document was placed gently on the table. A confidentiality agreement. A release of liability. A generous sum of money offered in exchange for silence. "This is for your son's future," one lawyer said smoothly. "Education, medical care, security. You won't ever have to worry again." The poor boy listened quietly. He didn't understand the words fully, but he understood the feeling. It felt like being asked to disappear. His mother hesitated, her hands shaking. She thought of rent overdue, of nights choosing between food and electricity, of hospitals she could never afford. The number on the page made her dizzy. But when she looked at her son bandaged, burned, still asking about the other child, something hardened inside her. She asked a simple question. "What happens if we don't sign?" The room fell silent. The billionaire cleared his throat. "There's no need for conflict," he said, though his jaw tightened. This was a tragedy. Accidents happen. "But the doors were locked," she said quietly. "The alarms didn't work." One of the lawyers smiled thinly. "We're not here to debate technicalities." The poor boy finally spoke. His voice was weak but steady. "I didn't do it for money." The billionaire flinched as if struck. That afternoon, the narrative shifted subtly. News segments praised the billionaire's quick response and state-of-the-art estate. The poor boy's role shrank further, framed as impulsive luck rather than courage. Online comments questioned why a child had been near the restricted wing at all. Rumors whispered that the family was trespassing. The world began to rewrite what had happened, smoothing out the uncomfortable edges. The poor boy felt it before he understood it. Nurses stopped mentioning him to reporters. Cameras never pointed his way. His mother was warned not to speak without guidance. When she tried to tell their story anyway, her calls went unanswered. Doors closed quietly, politely, firmly. Meanwhile, the billionaire's son recovered quickly. Private therapists, gifts, reassurance. He spoke often of the fire, of the heat, of the hands that pulled him out. He asked to see the other boy again. Each time, his father deflected. "Later," he said, "when things calmed down." But they never did. Pressure mounted. The poor boy's medical bills grew. Subtle threats arrived, letters about unauthorized presence, hints of legal consequences. His mother's job vanished without explanation. The money on the table began to look less like a gift and more like a lifeline being slowly withdrawn. And in the middle of it all, the poor boy lay awake at night, reliving the moment the glass shattered, wondering how something so right could feel so wrong afterward. He had faced fire without hesitation. Now he was facing something colder, quieter, and far more dangerous. A world determined to thank him just enough to forget him forever. By the end of the week, the billionaire stood before cameras, announcing a foundation for fire safety awareness, his voice calm, his image restored. Applause followed. Donations poured in. Somewhere else in the city, a child who had run into flames stared at a hospital ceiling, slowly realizing that saving a life had been the easy part. The shift came quietly. The way storms often do, no thunder at first, just a pressure change that made the air feel wrong. It began with the billionaire's son waking up in the middle of the night, screaming. Nurses rushed in, lights snapped on, monitors beeped, but there was no medical reason. He wasn't burning. He wasn't choking. He was staring at the door, shaking, whispering the same words over and over. "Don't lock it. Please don't lock it." Doctors called it trauma. Therapists called it survivor's guilt. His father called it temporary. But the boy knew better. He refused to sleep unless the door stayed open. He panicked when glass walls reflected firelight at sunset. He tore gifts apart looking for hidden locks. And every time his father tried to calm him with promises, the boy asked the same question, his voice small and relentless. "Why didn't you come get me?" The billionaire had no answer that didn't hurt. Across town, the poor boy was discharged quietly, almost reluctantly, as if the hospital itself wanted to erase the evidence of his presence. His arm would heal crooked. The burns would scar. Follow-up care was recommended but not scheduled. His mother signed forms she barely understood, thanked people who avoided her eyes, and took her son home to a one-room apartment that smelled faintly of disinfectant and fear. The money offer returned. This time it came without a visit, just an envelope, thicker, heavier, more urgent. Inside was a revised agreement and a message written in careful, polite language. The offer would expire in 48 hours. After that, the foundation would proceed unimpeded. The poor boy read it slowly, sounding out the longer words. When he reached the end, he folded the paper neatly and asked his mother a question that stopped her breath. "If I sign, does it mean what happened didn't happen?" She didn't answer right away. That night, she made a choice that frightened her more than poverty ever had. She called a number she had written down weeks earlier but never dialed. A journalist. Not a celebrity reporter. Not someone with bright teeth and rehearsed outrage. A local investigative writer known for stubbornness and very little else. At first, he didn't believe her. Then he saw the scars. Then he saw the photos. Then he saw the timestamps from the gala, the locked door schematics, the maintenance logs that had quietly vanished from public record. His tone changed. His question sharpened. He asked permission to record. The story didn't break immediately. It simmered. Meanwhile, the billionaire's carefully constructed narrative began to crack from the inside. His son refused to attend the foundation's launch event. When pressured, he broke down in front of guests, sobbing uncontrollably, screaming that the building was a cage. Guests laughed nervously at first. Then they stopped laughing. That video leaked. Investors called. Board members asked uncomfortable questions. Lawyers assured everyone it would blow over. It always did. Until a didn't single quotes T. The journalist published his piece on a Tuesday morning, deliberately timed between market openings. He didn't accuse. He documented. He didn't dramatize. He let facts do the damage. Locked exits. Disabled alarms. A child alone in a restricted wing. A rescue performed by another child who had no legal right to be there, but every moral reason. He named a poor boy. The internet reacted like a struck nerve. Clips resurfaced. Angles changed. The crowd's screams took on new meaning. The billionaire's frozen expression was replayed in slow motion. Comment sections filled with a question no amount of money could answer. Why didn't the father go in? The billionaire watched the numbers drop in real time. Stock prices dipped. Sponsors paused. The foundation's website crashed under traffic not from donations, but from comments demanding accountability. Still, he tried to control it. He offered an interview. Sat in a leather chair. Spoke about gratitude. About lessons learned. About generosity. When asked directly about the agreement offered to the boy's family, his smile tightened. That was a misunderstanding, he said. We only wanted to help. Then the journalist released the audio. The room went silent. The voice on the recording was calm. Professional, unmistakable. Terms, conditions, silence, consequences. The billionaire's son heard it too. He listened from his bedroom, door open, lights on, his hands clenched in the sheets. When it ended, he walked out and stood in front of his father in a way he never had before. Not small. Not afraid. Just steady. You tried to make him disappear, he said. The billionaire denied it automatically. Then stopped. The words felt hollow even to him. That night, something inside him finally broke not into guilt, but into fear. The kind that comes when power slips and doesn't come back. Regulators announced an inquiry. Fire inspectors reopened the case. Former employees began talking, one by one, emboldened by the fact that the truth was no longer alone. The gala guests who had filmed instead of helped deleted videos too late. Copies existed everywhere now. The poor boy returned to school quietly. He was treated differently, not with kindness, but with awe and discomfort. Teachers didn't know what to say. Kids stared at his scars. Some called him a hero. Some called him a liar. He ignored them all. He focused on one thing. He told the truth every time he was asked. When investigators came, he didn't embellish. He didn't cry. He described the heat, the glass, the fear in the other boy's eyes. He described how no one moved. How he did. When asked why, he shrugged slightly as if the answer embarrassed him. Because he was stuck. The billionaire watched those testimonies from a screen, his empire shrinking with every calm sentence. He had spent his life controlling outcomes with contracts and influence. Now he was watching a child dismantle him without anger, without threats, without asking for anything in return. By the end of the month, indictments were being discussed openly. Board members resigned preemptively. The foundation was suspended. The story was no longer about a fire. It was about who runs toward danger and who hides behind glass. And everyone knew. The final reckoning hadn't arrived yet. It was only getting closer. The day of the hearing arrived without spectacle, but the weight of it pressed down on the city like a held breath. No red carpets. No flashing lights. Just a courthouse surrounded by quiet crowds who had learned, slowly and painfully, that this story was no longer entertainment. It was accountability. The billionaire arrived first, stepping out of a black car in a tailored suit that once commanded respect with a single glance. Cameras clicked, but the energy was different now. No admiration. Only scrutiny. His face was controlled, but his eyes betrayed something unfamiliar: uncertainty. For the first time in his life, he was walking into a room where money could not negotiate the outcome. Minutes later, another car pulled up, smaller, older. The poor boy stepped out with his mother. His arms still stiff, scars visible where the sleeve rode up. There were no cameras rushing him, no handlers clearing a path. But people noticed. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. Someone whispered his name. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. Former employees, fire safety experts, journalists, members of the board who had resigned, and those who hadn't yet found the courage. And in the front row, sitting impossibly straight, was the billionaire's son. His father hadn't known he would be there. When their eyes met, something passed between them that no lawyer could intercept. The boy didn't look angry. He didn't look accusing. He looked disappointed. And that, more than any headline, made the billionaire's chest tighten. The proceedings were methodical. Painfully so. Evidence laid out piece by piece. Timelines reconstructed. Decisions traced back to names and signatures. The locks. The disabled alarms. The cost-cutting measures justified as temporary. Each explanation sounded smaller than the last, shrinking under the weight of what they had almost cost. Then the poor boy was called to testify. He walked to the stand without hesitation. No dramatics. No tears. Just a child telling the truth. He spoke about the sound the glass made when it cracked. About the heat. About how the other boy's screams got quieter, and how that scared him more than the fire. He spoke about being told afterward that he was brave, and then being asked to stay quiet. About the paper with a number on it. About how it felt like being told that what he did mattered only if it didn't inconvenience anyone powerful. The courtroom was silent. When asked if he hated the billionaire, he shook his head. "No," he said simply. "I just didn't understand why he didn't help his own son." The billionaire's lawyer objected. Too late. The words were already there, hanging in the air where everyone could feel them. Then something unexpected happened. The billionaire's son stood up. Gasps rippled through the room. The judge frowned, ready to intervene, but the boy spoke before anyone could stop him. His voice was shaking, but it didn't break. "He saved me," he said, pointing at the poor boy. "My dad didn't." The billionaire turned fully now, shock written across his face. "Sit down," he whispered urgently. "The boy didn't. They locked the doors," he continued. "I was scared. I thought I was going to die. And he came in anyway, even when everyone told him not to. The judge allowed it. The courtroom allowed it. No one dared interrupt. "I don't want his money," the boy said, his eyes fixed on his father now. "I want him to be okay. And I want you to stop pretending." That was the moment the case tipped from legal to irreversible. The verdict came weeks later, but the outcome was already sealed. criminal negligence, obstruction, coercion. The empire that had taken decades to build collapsed under the weight of its own shortcuts. Fines were levied that even his wealth felt. Board seats vanished. Partnerships dissolved. His name became a cautionary tale taught in business schools that once praised him. He did not go to prison immediately. Power has a way of delaying consequences. But it could not erase them. The foundation was dismantled. In its place, a court-mandated trust was established, not controlled by him, not branded with his name. It funded fire safety upgrades in low-income housing. It paid medical bills for victims no one had ever interviewed. It was overseen by people who had once been ignored. And the poor boy's family? They never took hush money. They never needed to. Scholarships came without strings. Support arrived without contracts. Not because he was a hero, but because the world had finally seen him as human. He returned to school where the whispers eventually faded, replaced by something quieter and more lasting respect. Years later, the two boys met again, not at a press event, not at a ceremony, just at a small community center opening funded by the trust. They stood awkwardly at first, older now, changed in ways neither fully understood. Then the billionaire's son did something no one expected. He hugged him, not for the cameras. There were none. Just because some debts can never be repaid with words. Across the room, the former billionaire watched from a distance. He was thinner, quieter, no entourage, no authority. Just a man forced to live with the truth that the greatest act of courage in his story did not belong to him. Glass had once protected him from consequences. Fire had taken that illusion away, and a poor boy armed with nothing but instinct and compassion had shown the world what real power looks like when no one is watching.